Well, I'm Mary Mocine. I know some of you. I started in '88 at Green Gulch and Berkeley Zen Center, and my teacher was basically Sojin Mel Weitzman Roshi. And in '89, I did a summer practice period at Green Gulch, and in '90, I went off to Tassajara, and I lived there for basically 4 years. And I was day off baker. I'm telling you my kitchen lineage, day off baker. Then I was kitchen crew. Then I was a cook for the guests, a guest cook. And then I was something else. And then eventually I was Tenzo there. And then when I left there, I moved to Green Gulch, and I was not Tenzo there. And then I got drafted to come here, and so in 95, I guess, 95, 96, I was Tenzo here. And that's my kitchen practice. I mean, I've been sort of in and out with the Tassajara kitchen to help out. Like I used to substitute for guest cooks who went on vacation sometimes in the I guess it would have been the early 2000s. I was Shuso there in '98 with Norman Fisher, and I received Dharma transmission from Sojin there at Tassajara in 2005. And I was installed as abbot. I founded the Vallejo Zen Center formally in January of 2000, and I was installed as abbot in 2008. And I stepped back as abbot in 23. And I'm now sort of doing some stuff, but I'm no longer in charge. And I don't have to think about any reminders or administrative things. And it's just wonderful. And also, I know that today is International Women's Day, and I thought I would at least mention my women kitchen mentors. They start with my mother, who was a very good cook and quite, what do I want to say? I don't know if quite adventurous is quite the word, but maybe. At least she was interested in a lot of things, and we didn't just eat standard stuff. Some of it was not so wonderful. She was Swedish, so she would serve rutabaga occasionally, and my father and my sister and I did not like it. I like it now, by the way, but not then. But anyway, she taught me how to cook, in the sense not just to follow recipes, but to cook. I'm the kind of cook. I read this somewhere, and I think this is supposed to be a good thing. I wasn't entirely sure. I'm the kind of cook that cuts against my thumb. Like if I'm cutting up onions to put in to fry up for spaghetti sauce or something, if I'm not making mass quantities. I learned the hard way that you cannot cut enough green beans for guests at Tassajara and just cut against your thumb. It's not a good idea. But I cut against my thumb. And I think I learned that from her, and I learned how to cook. And Julia Child, Mastering the Art of French Cooking, because in those books, she teaches you to cook. She demystifies things. I was talking to Kathy on the way over here about how she'll say, she'll teach you how to make mayonnaise, and she both classically by hand, but also in a blender. But she'll teach you how to make mayonnaise, and then she'll teach you how to make the fancy sounding thing, sauce remoulade. Well, what sauce remoulade is mayonnaise with some pickles in it. She doesn't use those kinds of words, but she teaches you that, so it's not so mysterious. So I feel like I learned a lot about cooking from her. And Marcella Hazan, who has many cookbooks about Italian cooking, and she was from the Venice area. And Diana Kennedy, sometimes known as the doyenne of Mexican cooking. And Madhur Jaffrey, who has a wonderful cookbook that we used at Tassajara. Also, it's called what is it called? I don't know, East Asian cooking or something. But it's all vegetarian recipes. Is that the right name for that book? Yeah. Anyhow, Kathy and I were in the kitchen together at Tassajara. At any rate, she, I think, it feels like a mentor to me. And Deborah Madison, she was the first chef at Greens, and she's especially the savory way. And vegetarian cooking for everyone that she did is a similar thing to Julia Child's in the sense that she teaches you about it. And so does The Joy of Cooking, by the way, which is also a basic cookbook for me. They teach you about it so that it's not so mysterious. So Deborah Madison has a recipe for custard. Vanilla, blah, blah, blah. But just to the left, there's a little tiny insert in red type that says custard is basically 1 cup of milk and 1 egg and 1 da-da-da-da. So that you understand kind of what custard is. And so these women have been mentors for me. And my first kitchen teacher, Zendo manager, was Tia Strozer, who I think lectured here on Wednesday night. And I decided not to listen to it because I thought, uh-oh, it'll drive me nuts, and then I'll start thinking to myself, oh, well, I better not talk about that, because so I just thought, just give your talk. And she was very rigorous. I didn't want to say strict. She was kind of strict, but she was rigorous about kitchen practice, and I'm very grateful to her for that. She wouldn't let us. She made us. We're cooking, when you're cooking for the guests, you're cooking often for 100 people, right? She made us beat egg whites and whipped cream by hand. And you can tell her that I'm still pissed off. I'll tell her. I don't know if I've told her that lately. And I learned a lot from her. A lot about being quiet in the kitchen and about paying attention. So now I'm going to, yikes, it's almost 10:30. I'm thrilled to have a clock here, by the way. There are many places, I lecture a number of places, and they don't have clocks. And how are you supposed to know when you have to start to wind it up? So I want to talk kind of from Dogen's instructions to the Tenzo. I changed in the Tanto's office, and I saw something that was probably where'd you go? There you were. The translations that you're using is not this one. It's a little different. We use an old translation. Oh, okay. Well, the one that I saw on your disc. At any rate, this is a Bible to me, Refining Your Life. It's Uchiyama Roshi's translation. He translated Dogen into modern Japanese and then wrote commentaries. Okay, but I guess Dogen's writing was somewhat, I don't know if this is true, something like Beowulf would be to us, or something like that. So that it's useful if it's translated into modern Japanese, and then he would write commentaries. And I've had this book since probably 88, 89. I don't know. It was given to me by another mentor, a woman named Maylie Scott. It wasn't about cooking so much. She was my practice leader basically at the Berkeley Zen Center. And Meili gave me this, and something by Trungpa, which I don't remember which one it was. Anyway, but she gave me this and told me that this book had been really important to her. The title in this edition is Refining Your Life from the Zen Kitchen to Enlightenment. And then the later edition it's reversed, and it's called From the Zen Kitchen to Enlightenment. And then below that, the subtitle is Refining Your Life. So I Googled it, though. I think you can find it either way. And I'm sure it's in the library. Anyway, this is marvelous. I'm familiar with Kaz's translation also, which is also fine. And it is helpful, I know, to have different translations. But I read this. There are a lot of. Forgive me. I used to, when I was starting out, I wrote notes and questions in ink in the margins. Not a good idea if ever you're going to look at the book again. It's very distracting. So, oh well. And as I imagine you know, and from the title I guess you can tell, it is based on the work of a Tenzo, of the head of a kitchen. But it's also about how to live your life. And he's talking about being a Tenzo, but his analyses and advice are about life and practice. And I find myself near tears. I mean, this is like a Bible to me, this book. And things come up from it in my mind, as I'm talking to somebody or something. It just pops up. Those of you who've been around and chanting it for a while, like for me, like the Genjo Koan, phrases from the Genjo Koan come up, and seemingly out of nowhere. For this also comes up that way. So the Tenzo Kyokun, the instructions to the Tenzo, has advice about what he calls like three kinds of mind, you could say. Joyful mind, and parental or kind, or I forget what the phrase I saw in the Tanto's office. Parental mind and magnanimous mind. And joyful is not the kind of joy, it's not sex and chocolate so much, but it's something, those are pretty good, but it's something deeper than that. It's deeper than that. And what he talks about, now let's see if I can, how about this? Yeah. When he's talking about joyful mind, he says, Dogen says, "My sincerest desire is that you exhaust all the strength and effort of all your lives, past, present, and future, and every moment of every day into your practice through the work of the Tenzo, so that you form a strong connection with the Buddha Dharma. To view all things with this attitude is called joyful mind." So it's the joy of completely committing to something, to each thing in front of you and each thing that you do. Maybe you could say it's the joy of letting go, or maybe better the joy of jumping in. The joy of not holding back, the joy of not being entangled with all of your ideas and your ancient tangled family karma and anything else. Parental mind or kind mind is, let's give it a tiny dip. It's the mind of caring for all beings as if they were your children. The mind of a parent that protects their child from rain and from sun and makes sure they have food and so on, even if they have to go hungry. That dedication. And I say, he doesn't say, but I will say, don't forget to include yourself. You're one of us. We so often say, okay, I'm going to be kind and parental to all you people. And I forget that, oh, I'm one too. So don't forget. Don't forget. I hasten to add that, because I think it's very easy to forget it. And magnanimous mind says it's like a mountain, like the ocean, unperturbed. So, for me, that's aspirational. But, and I'm going to tell you a bunch of stories, and I can see from some of them that there are fruits of practice in my responses to some of the various challenges that I've faced as a Tenzo or in ventures. So that's nice. But it's difficult sometimes. So I want to tell you some stories, and I broke them down, and so these first ones have to do with this notion of joyful mind, of complete dedication, complete commitment to cutting the carrots or stirring the stew, or the first instance of cooking the budín azteca, which is a classic Mexican recipe. I learned it from a man named Joaquin, who was at Tassajara my second practice period when Kathy and I were in the kitchen. Kathy was mentor too. She was my fukutin, and she was the boss of the cooks. Or we were staff. we did a lot of prepping. Anyway, Joaquin was in the practice period, and he really wanted to make something Mexican food for a day off dinner for the people in the practice period. And he asked me about it, and I asked the Tenzo, who was Daigan Luik at the time, and Daigan said, okay, if you help him. And I said, fine. So we made it, and it turns out what it is, budín can mean like pudding or something. In this instance, it was a casserole. It's sort of like a casserole of enchiladas, which is a great thing because you don't have to roll them. You just layer them like lasagna, sort of. So he and I made it. We figured out, what we would put in it as filling and what kind of sauce and how much we'd have to make. I think that was not a huge practice period, but there were maybe 40 people or something like that. So we figured it all out and ordered stuff and ordered, a lot of corn tortillas, and we had a great time. The tortillas are supposed to be somewhat stale, so the Tassajara kitchen is pretty big, right? We just had tortillas spread out over every surface possible so they could sit there and dry out a little bit. And he taught me how to make sauce with tomatillos, green tomatoes, and so on, and it turned out great, and it was delicious. And then he left at the end of that practice period and came back up here, I think, or he may have returned to Mexico City, I can't remember. And what I do know is that he died not long after. And that was sad news. And did you know him at all? And I asked Richard Urban, I realized if that were on a tape of what you talking about. Anyway, so I was a guest cook that summer, and I thought, well, I'll make the budín azteca, and I did, and I figured it out, and I started cooking that day, and I just felt so heavy, like I was just walking through molasses or something. Everything was slow and hard, and I was thinking about him, and it was rough. It was really, really hard. I've heard Ed mention this. I mean, don't let anybody tell you that you can always taste in the food whether the person making it was happy or not, or loving or not, or angry or not. I've cooked in all those modes, and I don't know that you could tell the difference. At any rate, it was very, very hard. And afterwards, I realized, oh, I was thinking about him. He was so much with me, and that sadness in my body. And I learned a better response later, sort of by accident. I mean, in fact, I wasn't fully present. I wasn't being joyful mind in the way that Dogen is talking about it. You see, I was carrying something, and I wasn't allowing myself to know it, and I wasn't allowing myself to physically experience it. And I'm jumping the gun in a way, but you know, what I understand now is if I had gone into the student eating area and just sat down and cried for a few minutes, it would have been a completely different experience. I would have been sad, but it wouldn't have been that heavy, hard experience. I was in denial, and I wasn't fully present. So sometime a little later in that summer, I guess, I was doing dinner, and I went in a kitchen in the morning to check to make sure stuff was ready or something, I don't know what. And I got into some tiny disagreement with Tia, I don't even remember what it was. And the rest of the morning, I was upset, and I kept saying to myself, sort of chuckling to myself and saying, wow, that's way out of proportion to what happened. You're carrying around some old stuff. And she, because of circumstances that are not relevant and no longer operate, she was in my family. And I mean, I had that kind of a transference, not that she was, anyway, she was just triggered something in me. And it wasn't her fault, and it had very little to do with her. And I knew that, and so I thought that was sort of cute. And I was still irritated. And so then I went and I started cooking dinner, and it came time to take a break. And I took a break, and I went up the stairs by the Zendo, heading towards the gate to sit down and take my break. And I tripped on those stairs, and I fell down. And I hurt myself a little, not much. And I just burst out sobbing and kind of laughing at the same time, because I knew damn well it wasn't about my knee. You know, that I was just finally letting go of this ancient tangled trigger. And that's what I think. I think that with that, I really learned something about being present with what was actually going on. If my body needed to grieve, then I needed to grieve, or whatever it was, that I needed to physically feel it, experience it. If it was knocking on my psychic door. And that may be when I realized the same thing about the Boudin and Joaquin. And a wonderful experience of being present and a wonderful teaching was from making bread. My first practice period, that was a tiny, there were 28 people in that practice period. And our Tangari, we were like 13 or something. I was like, we were almost half the practice period. Anyway, I was the day off bread baker, and Maya Wender taught me how to make bread. And she taught me the Tassajara way, where you make what's called a sponge, a sort of a slurry of flour and a lot of water and the yeast. And you let that sit for an hour or so. And then you add the salt and the, more flour. And then you, once it's not liquid anymore, you dump it out, and then you can start kneading it. And adding flour. And what she taught me was, when you think it's getting ready to stop kneading and stop adding flour, you wash your hand, you cut it in half, and you stick your hand, the palm of your hand, against the cut side and hold it there for a moment, and then you pull it back, and it should have some dough sticking to it. But it should come away. In other words, it shouldn't be like big strands of the dough following your hand, just a little bit. And if there's none, your dough is probably too wet, but you can live with that. But what I took from that is that bread is a relationship. And when I made bread, from then on, I had to be completely present with it. And it was a great teaching of joyful mind. It was a joyful thing to make bread. And it's alive, and it was a relationship. And it seems to me it was very useful, and it was a great teaching of being completely present. You have to be present when you're cutting carrots too. Because it's hard, because they're hard, so if you make a mistake, you might be in trouble. So I want to go on to parental mind, loving mind. When I first became Tenzo, I was thinking about it, how do I want to be Tenzo, aside from allowing people to use the Hobart to whip the cream. She's going to hear about this, isn't she? What? What did you say? Yeah, well, you're one of, there's at least 10 people in this room that I know. Anyway, I thought about, who am I? What do I want? How do I want to be? And I realized, I'm a one, a perfectionist in the Enneagram system, and my tendency is to sort of to judge and to say no, and to be critical, and that I didn't want to be that way. And so one decision I made was that I was just going to say yes, unless I had an actual reason to say no, that I was not going to follow my sort of instinct to say no. And it was just wonderful, and it was so liberating. And that kitchen, I think, ran well, at least it was okay. And Leslie told me people liked to work for me, so I thought that was nice to hear. And occasionally I'd say no, but when I did say no, I was clear about it. It wasn't this sort of reflexive no. And that was, it was, what did I say, like a wonderful feedback for me personally, oh, this works. Oh, I could be, I don't know, generous, and the kitchen still runs. So that was a wonderful thing. And another thing that I decided was related was that if somebody was late, rather than saying, how come you're late, or you're late, to say, was there some problem? Are you okay? What did something happen that you're late today? To ask people rather than starting with the blame. And starting with, the hidden assumption when you're immediately blaming people is that they screwed up. And, it might be that they fell on the steps to the Zendo, or who knows, you don't know what happened. And that worked really well. And it worked not just, I'm sure it was, the crew didn't know that I had that intention. But it worked well because I did have the attention. It made it easier for them, but it also made it much easier for me because I wasn't in opposition to them so much. It was a tremendous lesson. And then it was a challenge to me, to my equanimity and my parental sweetness. we were making lemon bars, and the recipe that I'm familiar with, I'm thinking the timing of this doesn't exactly. The recipe that I love, I found here in the Tenzo files, handwritten and titled Deborah Madison's Mother's Lemon Bars. I don't know if it's still there or if those files still exist, but that's a great recipe for lemon bars. And she just says, make the tart dough the usual way, something like that. But I think, anyway, what we did and what works is just to mix the flour and the butter together, and then add a little bit of liquid, I guess, and sugar and stuff. And this person was making the tart dough, and I know who it was, but I won't say. Anyway, and they called me over, and with this pained look on her face, it was a woman, and she showed me the dough. She had followed the recipe, she thought, and it was, it was just like all butter. It was like melting. And then we looked back and we realized, like instead of putting in 1 stick of butter, or 4 sticks of butter, I think, so that's a pound of butter, no, that's 2 pounds. No, it's a pound. It's a pound. Okay. So she had put in, instead of putting in 4 sticks, she put in 4 pounds. That's a lot. And I just, what I remember is she was at the end of the counter by that, like the kitchen, the sink that you use to wash vegetables and stuff, at that end. And I sort of came around a corner and saw it, and my heart stopped. And I didn't yell at her. I may have started laughing. But not, there's laughing that's at somebody and laughing it was laughing with her, and to tell her that it really, it just meant that we were going to make a lot of tart dough, and she just needed to add butter, add flour and sugar and so on, and mix it together, and I don't know what we did with it. I'm sure we did not throw it away. But I wasn't thinking about it. I was totally there for that, But, in hindsight, it's a fruit of practice, it seems to me, that I did not yell at her, and I did not, I don't know, say overreact. I mean, you can make somebody miserable, and you don't have to yell at them if you start saying, "Oh no, now what are we going to? Oh my Lord," then you don't have to yell at them. They'll feel bad all by themselves. So it just looking back, it seems that was a fruit of practice. I wasn't thinking about it at the time. I was just taking care of the tart dough so we could get dessert made or cookies. I don't know. I don't remember what it was about. And magnanimous mind, this rock-like, rock is a bad, he does use the word, but I think it's not a wonderful word, or a mountain. Because it seems to me that equanimity has to include flexibility. And he says, magnanimous mind is like a mountain, stable and impartial, exemplifying the ocean. It is tolerant and views everything from the broadest perspective. Well, that's a better. I like that image better. But he's talking about maintaining equanimity and not getting carried away. He talks about in the text. He talks about taking care of the vegetables and making a great soup from common vegetables and common materials, and not rejoicing when you get great ingredients, and not sneering at them when you get ordinary ones, or even maybe slightly wilted ones. And that equanimity, that maintaining one's balance when things are out of balance, that's very useful in your life. It's extremely useful in your relations with other people. And I think that that's a lot of what we practice with. What is it, when you're sitting zazen and you get on some train, especially a difficult thought train, can you let it go? And that's our practice, isn't it? Letting it go and letting it go and letting it go. Sometimes it feels like the whole period of zazen is just about getting on the train, getting off, getting on the train, getting off. But that is learning discipline. That is, here's the judging mind. I'm rejecting words like real zazen, good zazen. Forget I thought those things. That is zazen. It's all zazen, of course, including those times when it's free-flowing and obsession-free. So magnanimous mind, I think, does it comes with practice, and it's not perfect. I don't know anybody who doesn't get irritated, including some the various Zen masters that I know. I don't know any who are always perfect. I can't resist telling you an anecdote, even though it's almost 11. I say that's one of my lines, is that I know a lot of Zen masters, and none of them is perfect. To encourage us all, because none of us is perfect, right? I was at Berkeley Zen Center. When you give the talk, you're seated here. The altar is to your right, and then Sojun Roshi's seat was on the other side, right? And he was there when I was giving this talk, and I sort of glibly said this, I know a bunch of Zen masters, and not one of them is completely perfect. And he leaned forward and he looked at me and he said, "Except me." And the whole place broke up, and of course that was the joke for the rest of my lecture and after. So except for Mel. And those of you who know him know that there were occasions when he would not be perfect. But still, it is that kind of magnanimity, that kind of patience, that kind of flexibility is a fruit of practice, does grow with practice. Can anyway, I guess. I'll hedge my bet a little bit, but I do think so. It certainly is my experience. And patience is, I call it the dreaded patience practice, so that gives you some, if you don't already know me, that gives you some idea. And I'm going to tell you some stories. I was substituting for a guest cook, and I would give the Tenzo my menu, because it's just a lot easier to cook something you know how it's supposed to taste and how it works. So I was going to make a sort of a crustless quiche. That the basic flavoring was blue cheese. Anyway, I gave him my menu, and I gave him the sheet that you fill out, or I don't know now, but for the ingredients to order. And then he was on vacation, and I appear down there, and turned out he hadn't ordered the cheese, which was like the base. It was like, a lot of cheese and a little bit of egg and not much else, I think. And I was taken aback, but I just thought, well, and I went and then walk in, big refrigerator that you walk in, and I just took all the cheese that wasn't already, what do you call it, like saved for something. And I got out the Hobart is a professional mixer. You might have seen them in a bread place or something. Anyway, there's one. Is there one here? Yes. And anyway, it's got a bowl like this metal, you know, and it's about like that. And I think it's 5 gallons. Yes. I don't know who the Tenzo is. I don't know. Anyway, I just kept throwing stuff in there. That's all. And you know, I guess it was not that hard to maintain my equanimity because there was enough, and there was at least the main cheese was blue cheese, and there was blue cheese, so it had the right flavoring, and I just kept putting in cheese and eggs, and I guess I put in some milk. I don't remember, until the Hobart was full, and I could have thrown a fit about it, but I didn't. And then there was the gravy that was here. And one thing that I have to remember when I am like in charge of a kitchen, especially someplace like here, when there often are a lot of people in the kitchen and people relatively new, they're just, you know, it's their house job once a week to help out or something. That if they may not be cooks, they may not automatically know the following. So I was making gravy for dinner and there wasn't enough, and so I turned to somebody, one of the crew, and I said, "Uh-oh, there's not enough volume. Go get some dried mushrooms and, you know, simmer them for 10 or 15 minutes." So she did, and then she came back to me and she said, "Okay, I drained them," and those of you who are cooks know, it never occurred to me that I needed to say, "I want the liquid in order to increase the volume." It just didn't occur to me. But she wasn't a cook. And so, you know, I guess she assumed, you know, you simmer fancy mushrooms, you want the mushrooms, don't you? No. I mean, sure, dump in the mushrooms too, but anyway, I think I showed, but I did not much, and I don't remember. I was telling this to Kathy on the way over here. I don't remember what we did. We did something because dinner appeared, but that was a challenge to my equanimity. And I don't know if she, I know inside I responded because dinner was due in about 15 minutes, and I guess you could water the gravy or something. Anyway, you know, it was a punch in the gut. But it wasn't on purpose, and she didn't know, and I hadn't told her that I wanted the liquid. But those kinds of, I think that kind of thing, that's the Tenzo's practice. And it's our practice in life. When in any kind of relationship where you're working with somebody or friends or whatever, when somebody does something not on purpose, but that because of whatever circumstances is a challenge for you, how do you respond? How do we respond? Do we remember it's not on purpose? Do we remember, this is a whole other lecture, but you know, these are hard times, and people are set against each other. We are set against one another. And can we remember that people that are on have a different perspective on politics of the time, you know, that most of them are not doing it on purpose to get you. And most of them are as afraid of you as you are of them. That's when we can remember that. That's magnanimous mind. And my last story I'll tell you is that this was at Clearwater at Vallejo Zen Center. Somebody was in charge of lunch and was supposed to cook rice in a rice cooker and make salad and heat up soup and so on. And we came up, or I came up just before, it was time to eat lunch, and we all came upstairs. And it turned out he forgot to turn the rice cooker on. That's a good, at least a half hour, more like 45 minutes, even for white rice. But, and so, you know, one thing about kitchen practice that you learn is you always have boiling water ready. Always have boiling water ready. Even if you have a big samovar available, you always have boiling water ready. Is that right? So he did. There was boiling water. So we had, I don't know, we had couscous or something instead of rice. Worked out okay. He was amazed that I hadn't been screaming at him. But I feel like it's a fruit of practice, that's part of the job. It's a job of a Tenzo, and it's a job of all of us, each of us, when we're relating to other people, especially if you're in any kind of position of authority in relation to them. And dealing with these challenges, I think, has deepened my patience practice. And I want to say one more thing about, maybe most of you know this, probably this is our shared history. You know, I was director here. I lived here for 4 or 5 years. Anyway, the floors. I don't know if you know who Isan Dorsey was. You ever read Street Zen? He was the abbot at Harvard Street, but before he lived here. And I'm told, and if this is wrong, don't tell me, okay? The story is that when Isan was work leader, he was just obsessive about keeping these floors, his red floors, nice and shiny and clean. And Suzuki Roshi loved him for that. And at one time, he was like polishing the floors, and Suzuki Roshi came running up behind him and jumped on his back and kissed him and hugged him and thanked him for taking such great care of these floors. And when I was director, I told that story to the work leader then, whose name was Butch Baliut, who maybe a few of you knew. And so Butch was equally, he was inspired by that, and he was equally fanatic about keeping these floors right. And I was thrilled when I saw there was a video on Facebook or something, and there was, the floor looked the same. I think Ren Bunch, somebody mentioned something, oh, I see the floors are still the same, that's great. And I say, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I hope that you will read this. I like this because I love Uchiyama Roshi, and his commentaries always helpful. But at any rate, and there's a movie, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with, a movie called Zen, and it's a lot based on the Tenzo Kyokun, a lot, not all of it, but a lot of it. They got the old Tenzo from the ship, and the other one with the mushrooms, and Tetsugikai being hard-nosed to a kitchen guy. So let us bear in mind these minds, joyful mind, deeply, deeply letting go mind, deeply present, totally present. When you are, you don't even know that you are, and then later you can notice, oh, I was completely absorbed in cutting those carrots or writing that talk. And parental mind, extending that kind of loving care to everybody, including yourself, and including the vegetables. You know, he also says, take care of these things as if they were your own eyes. And magnanimous mind that great fruit of practice. As much as we can occupy that territory, let us do that. And let us not beat ourselves up when we don't manage to do it, because that's not useful. So let us enjoy Women's Day and Women's History Month, I think it is, and get to know your women mentors. I assume you have quite a few. I hope you do. So I think we do questions in the back of the dining room, right? So not now? Okay.